Hey everybody, welcome back to Meaningforge. Today I have with me Douglas Spencer. Before we dive into how he makes, embodies, and shares meaning in his life, a brief introduction. Douglas is a leader who helps mission-driven leaders reframe their focus and remaster their message to thrive in ambiguous environments. Welcome to the Meaningforge. And we're going to kind of talk about some of the same things, but with a much different flavor. As you can see, we have some symbology here, the Meaningforge.
Yeah.
And it's going to be great because we start walking through this process of making, embodying, sharing, and in some cases, disciplining yourself to that meaning. So first, would you mind telling us a little bit about your podcast and what your objective is on that?
Yeah, sure. So I have a podcast that comes out every 2 weeks. It's audio only, and not nearly as ambitious as you are. It is called Messaging on a Mission. And I talk with either leaders or subject matter experts on topics that will help leaders of mission-driven organizations do their work better. So, for example, I had a former speechwriter for the U.S. Senate on to talk about writing speeches. I've had people on talking about with the pandemic, what's a hybrid mix between live events and remote events. We've had someone just talk about how you message around impact to make certain that as you talk about your work, you do it in a way that reinforces the impact you're having. So there's a whole bunch of different topics, all focused on helping leaders of not-for-profits or social enterprises, or really any organization, understand how to message what they do in a way that's smart and compelling.
I like that. And I was listening to one of the episodes recently, kind of leading up to this, and you just published it on with Chris, and the way you led into that was really it was heartbreaking in a way, but also like it was a really good tribute to him. And so I appreciate you sharing that conversation and making yourself vulnerable in that regard.
Thanks. It's still pretty raw. For those of you who don't know, on November 22nd, I recorded a podcast episode with one of my closest friends, very, very close friend. We've known each other for 30 years. We were roommates back in the day, when we were young and poor. He's a fundraiser and has had an incredible journey. And on December 31st, he died of a heart attack unexpectedly. Great shape, barely drank, exercised, but it was his time, and it's been really rough. And so talking to his husband and his sister, we all decided that, yeah, we should still run the episode. So as we're recording that, the episode dropped today.
I was listening to that recently, and so again, today when we're recording this is 1/19, 2022. So again, please check it out, and other content on his. And I'm sorry, the title is escaping me.
Messaging on a Mission.
Messaging on a Mission. I even wrote it down, and I'm still missing it. But anyway,
all good. All good.
My chair is not cooperating today. Okay, I think we're good. So Douglas, this is the life story, and this is where we kind of start to understand where people come from, their narrative. And just like in the intro, it's important that we understand where people come from by listening to their stories, that we can connect with them on a very deep and personal way. And the favorite question I always ask is, Douglas, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and as we start going through this, how did you get where you are today?
Okay, well, that's pretty. That's pretty simple question. So right now I live in Boston. I've been in Boston. Been in Massachusetts for 34 years. I've been in Boston itself for since 1994, something around there. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up in a very small town, 900 people in Ohio, about an hour outside of Cleveland. There were more cows than cars in the town I grew up in. no stoplights, a little itty bitty sidewalk, patch of sidewalk, which no one really understood why it was there. Yeah, I was there. I was born there. I come from a pretty small family. I have one sister. She's quite a bit older than I am, and I was a surprise. When my mother went to the doctor, she thought she was going through the change, and apparently he laughed and said, "Well, you are going through a change. It's just not the one you thought you were going through." So I was a surprise. And so I went to a small liberal arts school in Ohio called Marietta College. I'm actually now on the Alumni Association board, which is really a lot of fun. And then after about a year, I decided to move to New England because I had a lot of friends from college that were in New England, and I never left. So I've had a number of different jobs, and now I am as you referenced before, I am a consultant for mission-driven organizations, not-for-profits, social enterprises, any organization that's trying to solve a societal problem that needs attention. I worked in a large corporation. I had a great job. It was global. I literally went around the world on somebody else's dime, and I loved it. But it was time to move on, and I did. And so this is what I'm doing now.
Well, that's a great breakdown. And I guess like you said friends that were gonna pull you into Boston area in the New England area. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Patriot jokes aside, and all the New England sports teams aside,
right.
Why were you pulled to stay in New England and expand in that way?
Sure. Well, and might as well just, if we're going to go deep, might as well just jump in right now, huh?
Let's do it.
I'm an openly proud gay man, and the town I grew up in Ohio was the family I grew up in, and the town I grew up in was very, very conservative. And at the time in the 1980s, Ohio was pretty conservative too. The thought of living my life as an openly gay man in Ohio seemed a lot more difficult than it did in Massachusetts. And even though I didn't come out right away, in the back of my mind, I knew that was going to happen eventually. I had to stop. I was going to lose the battle eventually, and thankfully I did. For years I tried desperately to have it not be true, but then when I stopped fighting it, I realized, oh my God, that was the best thing ever. So that's the main reason why I stayed in Massachusetts, and I'm very, very glad I did.
So you went to Marietta College. What was that experience like for you, and what was the major takeaway?
It was a great experience. So was at the time that I went, it was about 2/3 of students from the East Coast. And I grew up in Ohio. There was quite a few of us from Ohio, but I just met a lot of different types of people. There were Jewish people. I didn't grow up with any Jewish people. It was fascinating. It was just really interesting to meet different types of people. Now, it wasn't as diverse as a college as it is now, and it still could be better. To be fair, it was mostly white, and it was mostly middle class. So in some respects, it wasn't very diverse at all. But from where I came from, it was very eye-opening. I went to school with kids that came from a lot of money, and I thought, oh wow, okay. It was just really interesting, and it was a great education. It was a liberal arts education. I learned a lot. I learned about how to learn more. I learned. It was a great experience. I majored in journalism. I was going to major in English because I wanted to go to law school, but then I quickly realized that was not for me. And so I studied journalism. Never really wanted to be a journalist, but it was a great major for me because, and I use it every day. It taught me the reporter's mentality of understanding a new topic. The whole who, what, when, where, why. So because of that, I feel like I can go into new situations and learn enough about a situation to at least understand it at the base level. And so that was a really great experience for me. And I made a lot of great friends. I'm still friends with many of the people I went to college with. And it was a really great experience.
All right. And then. So you go to Marietta College. You're exposed to a wide range of people,
Right.
and you're exposed to journalism. You start chasing that down. You of course now you use it every day in your podcasting and marketing as well.
True.
Looking at your illustrious LinkedIn career, I see a few director, VP stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What made you go into that field? What drew you into chasing down marketing, and doing that in a meaningful way?
Okay. Chasing down marketing. I don't think I've ever heard that before. I'm not sure that I ever chased down marketing. I think it's kind of almost like musical chairs. That was a seat that was left when the music stopped. So I sat down. My first job out of college was working at a magazine that was founded by some alums, Bill and Elsa Thompson. They have both since passed. They were like second sets of parents to me, but they had a magazine called Birdwatchers Digest. And I was not, am not, and never have been, and probably never will be a bird watcher. But it was a great experience. I sold advertising, and so it was my first sales job. And so I sold advertising to small businesses that sold like bird seed, and maybe I did have one big account that sold binoculars, but it was west of the Mississippi. So it was all by phone. Right. I remember one time there was this one guy in Seattle I desperately wanted to sign. I wanted his business. And I woke up one morning, I thought, yes, I know I'm going to get it. So I run into the office, I pick up the phone, I call him, and I hear a very groggy person say, hello. And I realized, oh shit, it's 6 o'clock in the morning there. And so I immediately hang up the phone because we didn't have caller ID back then. That was just I don't know. That was one of the things I remember about the job. So I did that job, and I wanted to move to Boston. And so after a year, I moved to Boston, got a job at a hospital doing PR, then did some freelance writing, then did some marketing at a high tech firm, which is right around the time I came out, which was a big part. It was a big deal for me. It was a big, so I had a job that I could do almost in my sleep, which was great because it helped me focus on figuring out who the hell I was now. And then I got a job at a large corporation called Thomson. And I started out as a marketing manager, then a marketing director, then a VP for marketing, and then global head of branding, which was an awesome job, which happened when the Thomson Corporation purchased the Reuters Corporation. And I was really lucky to get that job and helped launch the new Thomson Reuters brand globally. And that was around 2008. And so it really just found me. A career in marketing just really found me. And I just kind of went with it because I liked it. I was okay at it, pretty good at it. And it afforded me a lot of, and what I like about what I do now, especially, is it gives me a lot of opportunity to not only be creative, but also strategic. So, I am creating, I do work in colors, and I work in photography, and I work in writing, mostly writing than the other stuff. But I also have to think strategically. And so it's a really great blend. And that's what's really kept me in it all these years.
What I find really fascinating is, I said chase down marketing, and then it's something that was kind of revealed to you that you enjoyed, which is also part of this, right? Sometimes as we start making ourselves, we start to see what's revealed to us in the process, that inherent beauty, I think. And I'm kind of like trying to understand I have it phrased as opportunity for creativity and strategy. Would you mind elaborating on why that's kind of a major force for you?
Sure. And I think it's because I get a lot of my, we all get fed by different things, right? Extroverts need to be around other people, right? I'm a little bit of an extrovert, although the pandemic has really made me get to know my inner introvert a lot better, and I didn't know he was there, and I really like him. So I get a lot of energy and personal satisfaction from being able to create, whether that's writing, which is what I do most, or whether that's working with imagery or with color. All of those are afforded to me in what I do now. I have I work with a woman that we've been working together for almost 20 years. She's my senior art director. And I know she cringes whenever I try to do something creative, because I just, like they say, know enough to be dangerous. But luckily she's around to fix it for me, so I don't look completely stupid. But I enjoy that part of it. I get a lot of satisfaction from that. But I also like solving problems. And that's where the strategy part comes in. I love being able to think, all right, well, how are we going to? So, for example, if this client has trouble getting their state legislature to understand what they do, how can we fix that? And so I love that kind of problem solving element to it. So that's really what today, why I really enjoy what I do so much, is because it affords me that energy that you get from being creative, and it affords me the opportunity to be strategic and to solve problems.
I like that a lot. And the merging of, because like you need creative solutions in strategy, and you need that. And like, I never really kind of, it's hard for me to kind of wrap my head around some of the creative aspects of journalism, because I'm a supply chain guy, so I'm very, I don't know, marketing is not my thing,
Yeah.
but I know it's important.
Mhm.
And people like you, like meeting people like you, so that's awesome. And I guess before we move on into the hammer, one of the greatest things that I kind of want to talk about is the influence of your parents and your siblings.
Mhm.
How has that impacted who you are today?
Oh gosh. And I let me first say that I know that my parents did their absolute best. And that is the only thing I can ask of them. They did their absolute best. It was a really tough time. It was a tough time in many respects. First of all, they were thrown this child out of nowhere that they didn't expect. They were already starting to plan their retirement. And then boom, here we come. I think my father was challenged after a while when it became clear that I wasn't like a boy. I wasn't a rough and tumble kind of kid. And so I think that was challenging for him. My mother was also challenged because it was a time where women's liberation was starting to take over, or take not over, it was starting to get attention. And they had a very, very old school marriage where, my father was head of the household. He was in charge. What he said did, what he said went. And I think it was really challenging for her, because she found herself torn between two different norms, right? The way, when they got married in 1947, for crying out loud. And so that was different than in 1977 when they were, raising me. So I think it was really challenging for them. And so I think, one of the things that one of the positive things they instilled in me is a sense of volunteerism. My mother was a volunteer for Reach to Recovery. She was a breast cancer survivor, and so she actively counseled other breast cancer patients. She also did a number of things with the church. She was a volunteer. My father was a volunteer. He was a Mason and a Shriner. The Shriners Hospital for crippled children was a very, very important cause to him. And I think growing up, I always saw them. Giving of themselves. And so I think that was a really important lesson I learned from them. And I think that's something I've kept with me. And I'm very grateful for that.
I'm still here. I had to take down that's a common theme, believe it or
Mm.
not. The hammer.
Mm.
This is inspired from like Thor's hammer, right? I mean, that's like the lightning, everything. One of the things I often ask myself is, how do we use hammers? Why? Are we using them correctly? probably not like Thor and just go banging around everything. Probably can be used to build bridges just a little bit, used to build things. And it's the way I kind of like to use this is it also helps kind of pull the materials in together in some regard. And if in the forging process, right, we're talking about, making your sword, which we'll get into how you embody that later. The thing that I often ask myself is, what are the major influences in a person's life, right? We've already kind of hit on your parents, right? And some extended family members. Who's been an influential person outside of your immediate family relationships, like a mentor or a coach, and why?
I think the first people that come to mind are the ones I already referenced, and that's Bill and Elsa Thompson that owned the magazine I worked for right out of college. They were very, very smart and very, very witty and talented. They were musicians. They were curious. They were inquisitive, and they were welcoming. And I remember writing them a letter at one point that to the point of for the first time I really truly felt unconditional love. And it was just such a wonderful reception that they gave me for no other reason than they just wanted me in their life. They didn't have to have me in their life. They didn't, they just wanted me in their life. And I think that was a really beautiful experience for me. And it was kind of hard for me to get my head around at first, but I think that probably is one of the most influential experiences or people I've met. And I think that, I do try to emulate them a lot, as much as I can. Although I don't think we vote the same, but besides that, I do try to emulate them as much as I can. I'm really, really grateful for their for the impact they've had on my life. They had 3 children. Only one remains, which is another heartbreaking story. And I spent an evening with her in October. I went back to Ohio, and we had amazing time. We just picked up where we left off, and it was just amazing. And so building that kind of community and relationship and family, has been massively monumental to me. And really, that's what gives me my strength, gives me my focus, gives me my grounding, and that concept of building a family of your own.
Bill and Elsa Thompson, did I get that right?
Yeah.
They were influential to you. You emulated them in many ways, and you wrote a letter. And I guess really you wrote a letter saying how much love you felt in their presence and in that community that they built with you in it.
Well, actually, to put a little more detail around that, it was my coming out letter. So I wrote them. This is before we had email. It's before we had texting, and it's when phone calls cost a lot of money. I was raised by children of the Depression, and so long distance calls, those are very special. So I wrote them a letter coming out of the closet, and I referenced that in it, and that's where that was the context with which I brought it up.
Wow. And so I guess if you don't mind, what was some nuggets of wisdom that they gave you during your time with them? Like what's a good significant event?
I don't know that there are any significant events. It's never like, I don't remember them ever sitting me down and saying, "All right, listen, son, here's some great advice." I don't remember any nuggets, any sound bites like that. I think it's just really more by example. The fact that they were good listeners, the fact that they were good storytellers, and they took pride. I think, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't think I've ever really articulated it in my own head. And I think part of it is that they took great pride in the people that they surrounded themselves with. So other people's accomplishments were not their accomplishments, but they were happy for other people to be successful, and they were happy for to be surrounded by people that were feeling joy and they were happy for things to go well and positively. And so without even having thought about that before, I think that's part of, I think that's part of their legacy to me.
Wow. So I think that is a really great way of looking at this. And I appreciate you sharing that and putting that to words, because that to me says a little bit more. It says a little bit more about why they're so influential. Douglas, one of the questions I would have is, what's an unexpected path that's been laid out before you that you didn't know existed?
Well, certainly being gay, certainly not being in a relationship. Even, most gay people, most LGBTQ folks are in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are in multiple ones, which is no judgment, right? But not everyone is, and not everyone has to be. And like having children, not everyone should have children. Not everyone has to have children. And I think that's something that a lot of folks struggle with, both gay and straight. I don't think that's, I know. And, when I was coming out, when I was in my 20s, being gay and having children was monumentally hard, and it was almost impossible. And so when I came out, I had to kind of mourn the children I wouldn't ever have, because I was raised to believe that, of course, I'm going to have children. Of course, I'm going to be a dad. And so when I came out, being a father was so far out of reach. It wasn't impossible, but it was so far out of reach. And so that was a challenge. But as I look back, I realized that that's fine. I probably shouldn't have been a father, because I think that, again, they did their best, but I think that I probably I didn't have the best examples. So I'm not sure how good of a father I would have been. I do know that I have had impact on people. I know that I have been fatherly or big brotherly to a lot of folks. And what is the point? Is the point to just be able to say I have children, or is the point to actually have an impact on people? And so, I've had impact on people, and I'm very grateful for that. And, they won't be feeding me applesauce in the nursing home, but all right. And we can talk about actually, and so we can, no, I've never been married. I've never been in actually a long-term, what you would call a long-term relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I thought that was some sort of a character flaw, that I just, that I never mated, never paired up with someone for very long. And through the work of a really talented therapist, I got over that. And I realized that, not everybody needs to be in a relationship. Not everyone should be in a relationship. And so, I mean, if one showed up tomorrow, I wouldn't say no, but it helped. I think that one of the things I really love about my life is that how do I say this? The unexpected paths it's taken. I feel like, and this might be an analogy that is lost on some folks, maybe even you. I don't know. So when you think about the old-fashioned records, that had the albums, the wax ones with the needles. Yeah. So I feel like so many people, they get in that groove, and they're always in the same groove, and it never occurs to them that you don't have to be in that groove. And, one of the blessings of being gay is that I was forced to rethink what is normal and what I should do and what is expected of me. I was forced to think that. And it's not, certainly it's not just gay people that get this. So to be perfectly clear. But I think that one of the things I'm really grateful for is the fact that I have in many instances been able to thwart expectations, or not follow an expectation just because I'm supposed to. Now, to be absolutely fair, I'm not perfect. There are a lot of things I do that I probably shouldn't, because it's the groove I'm in. So I'm not a master of that, but I do feel very grateful that I have had the opportunity to do some really hard self-reflection and make decisions that aren't expected.
Go on this unexplored path, and you start navigating this way of being, right? And in which case it's connecting and being with people. And I would say the comment you made earlier was really alluding, because it's like, I'm learning to like my inner introvert, which I think is really interesting now, kind of listening to this part of the conversation. So one of the things I kind of would like to, maybe come to is, you also mentioned you had some bad examples. And when we come and we talk about the materials, right, that we bring to the forge and we start making ourselves, what was a bad example that you felt shouldn't have been in there? And then how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So my father and I had a really, really tough time. It was, and I can't overstate this enough. I'm not blaming. I understand and I appreciate and I respect the journey that brought him to where he was. But his belief that, and he actually said this to me once, and when we were having the hardest time, he says, I need to make you hate me in order to turn you into a man. And oh my God, I thought that was just heart-wrenching that he would say that. And I felt bad for him when he said that. But that was his mentality. He believed that in order to turn me into a man, I had to hate him. He had to make me hate him. Which I don't know where that came from, because his father was one of the most lovely people that ever walked the face of the earth. Anyway, and he also was a believer in reverse psychology. So, for example, he said, I remember once he said to me, because he was in the Army Air Corps. That was before the Air Force was a thing. He was in the Army Air Corps in World War II, and he was very proud of that, as he should be. And he was a bombardier, and but he didn't get to be a pilot, and he always wanted to be a pilot. His vision wouldn't allow him to be a pilot, so that was always a goal for him, to be a pilot. And I remember once he said to me, "You're probably not smart enough to be a pilot." And I just looked at him. I was probably 8, and I said, "Well, I don't want to be one anyway, so what's the point?" But his whole mentality, his belief system was that reverse psychology, that if I tell the kid he's not smart enough to be a pilot, he's going to go out and be a pilot. Well, it didn't work. And I don't think he ever clicked. It ever clicked with him that didn't work. And so I got a lot of well-meaning, I see now, well-meaning attacks and dismissals and condemnations and insults. And I see, now as an adult, I see that he was coming from a good place, really weird and irrational good place, but that was it nonetheless. And so that I know that we'll talk about this at some point, but that's still with me. I still doubt myself way more than I should. And so I have to remind myself that, well, no, that's where it comes from, and that's not necessarily relevant.
All right, so welcome to the sword. We've already been in the hot forges of life, forging away, pounding away, building bridges, building connections, building community in some regards as well. And so really, so far, this conversation has led us to where we are. And when we left off with the hammer, one of the things that we kind of need to look at is how we embody the sword, right? And some swords, sometimes you make a bad sword. Sometimes you make a good sword. Sometimes you give away your sword. All these things are great. And so the sword is effectively an embodiment of who you are. You carry it around with it's your confidence, it's empowerment, it's empowering others, all those other fun things. And what was one of the struggles that you had to overcome dealing with the reverse psychology of your father, or your father's methods of reverse psychology?
I I appreciate your suggestion that I have overcome it. And I haven't, and I never will. And it is something that I will battle my entire life, and that's okay. We all have things that we battle, but I am constantly on the lookout for times where I doubt myself irrationally. And so that is my biggest, that is one of the biggest personal challenges I have on a regular basis. And you have to be vigilant, and I try, and I am, and you're also has to be a balance, right? Because you can't go the opposite direction and become obnoxiously self-confident. It's all got to be, it's all about balance, right? It's got to be, everything has to be in context. And so, yeah, I don't think I'll ever get over the feeling that I'm inferior, or I don't think I'll ever not have these little moments of thinking about being inferior or being less than. I overcome them on a regular basis, but that's because that's what I have to do.
Would you mind maybe walking us through how you overcome these these moments of self-doubt, this irrational feeling, in order to keep your sword, may I say, sheathed, to prevent from hurting someone else and yourself?
I've never heard the word sheath used in polite conversation before, but that's okay. I love it. Sorry. Couldn't resist. That was an easy one. That was an easy one.
That was an easy one. That was good. That was good. That got me.
So, sheathing my sword. All right. So I think, and this,
I want to rephrase this.
No. I think let's keep it. It's good. It's funny. It's funny. Let's keep it. People need to laugh, right? We need to laugh. I am a huge believer that you have to bow to the absurdity of life and just laugh sometimes, because it's ridiculous. Otherwise, I mean, come on, humans, we're ridiculous. The way we talk to each other, it's ridiculous. The things we do, ridiculous. We have to laugh at them once in a while. Otherwise, we just give them more importance than they should. So going back to sheathing my sword, I think a lot of it, and I know there's a question you're going to ask me about what are my top 3 books, and one of them is 10% Happier by Dan Harris. For those of you who don't know, Dan Harris is an ABC News anchor, and he had a panic attack in front of America. He was delivering the news. He had a panic attack, and so he started doing this investigation about meditation, and he was, as he would say, the opposite of anybody that would ever meditate. And so his book 10% Happier is this guide to just incremental steps. And so I read that book. It was amazing. And all right, I didn't read it. I listened to it. It was Audible. I'm a big audiobook guy, but isn't that great? And so I've started meditating, and I meditate every day. I think 2019, I had a perfect record every day. 2020, I missed a couple. This year, I've already missed a couple. No, 2020, I had perfect. 21, I missed some. This year, I've already missed some. But the point is, I try to meditate every day. And it's just a minute of just stopping your brain and just giving it a rest. Because we give every other part of our body a rest, right? And we never try to give our minds a rest. And people say, well, I can't stop my brain. I can't stop thinking. Well, of course you can't stop thinking. The point is that the point of meditation is, if you have something in your head, you just find a way to move it aside. And it can be anything. It can be the noise the noise your dog is making. It can be a siren outside. It can be a voice in your head saying you're not good enough. And so this whole idea of being able to take thoughts and sounds and inputs and just putting them aside, that's what meditation is all about. And it's been hugely helpful. And I referenced it before. I think that everyone should be in therapy at least once in their life. It's only a slight exaggeration to say therapy saved my life. And I'm very grateful for the time I was in it. I'm no longer in it. I probably should be, but I'm not. But the point is, I think that kind of reflection and focus and and reverence for your mind and your spiritual side is really important and lacking. I mean, I love what Simone Biles did when she said, listen, you know, I can't do this. I can't do this. I need to take a break. You know, if that had been her elbow, nobody would have put up any kind of issue. They would, oh, it's too bad her elbow's not hurting, or it's too bad her elbow is hurting. But if it's your psyche, or if it's your emotional state, or if it's your mind, then yeah, suddenly that's weak when you try to recognize that. I think that's insanity.
I agree with that. The mind is always something you have to wrestle with, and if that is not aligned too, just like everything else, like that's where you have some massive issues. And meditation, yes, I agree with you. Meditation is extremely helpful, and it's not about not thinking. It's about what you pay. I've heard it phrased as what you pay attention to, or something to that effect, and trying to pay attention to something else, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's interesting how you went to meditation, and you went to the incremental route to kind of counteract and in a way balance some of this.
Right.
So you can wield your sword a little bit better. Okay. So when you embody the sword, some of the things that we have to contend with is exactly what we just talked about: the good and the bad, and the balance through meditation in your case, and carrying through the bad stuff and harnessing it, I would say, to a positive end, right? And then on top of that, one of the things I always ask is, how do we appropriately use the sword? Is it an offensive weapon? Is it a defensive weapon? Is it a weapon of empowerment? Because if we frame it under this, right, we make ourselves and we embody that. And so how are you, through being a leader in your field, helping to empower other people to make their own swords in their lives and carry themselves forward?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I've ever thought about it in those terms. And, you know, it really goes back to this idea of living by example. And so, you know, I try to, and I do fail. I do. And especially during the pandemic, I think I don't think I've done as well as I could, but just setting an example and living your life the way that you would hope others would live, and do the things you would hope others would do, and say the things you would hope others would say, and try to be as genuine and as authentic as you can. And to me, it's all about just living by example, and helping people, maybe helping people see their own potential. And I think this also goes back to Bill and Elsa. I think that they did a lot without knowing it, of counteracting the crazy that was implanted in me early on. And so I think there's always opportunity, because I am not the only one at all to have had parents that sow doubt in your heads, right? I mean, that's typical. And so I don't feel special that way at all, to be very clear. And I think it's really helpful for us all to help each other see our good points that we might not otherwise see, or that we don't, for some reason, want to acknowledge, that we don't want to admit they're there, because we're just afraid of that, and we're afraid of being good at something, or we're afraid of, we just have this identity of, that we have this identity of being bad at math, or we have this identity at being bad at sports, or we have this identity at being blah, 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 blah. And if that's not actually the case, I think it's really helpful for other people to help you rethink that. And so doing that by example is really the way I hope I present myself. I strive to present myself, and I feel terrible when I don't. Was that lucid?
No, you're good. You're good. There's everything. All that was good. One of the things that I would like to maybe explore is, was there ever a significant event that kind of helped say, yeah, this is what I'm doing and what I should be doing?
See, again, now it's funny when you ask me that question, I've got little conversations going on in my head. Well, you can't say that. You can't tell that one. That's going to make you look like a tool. But I'll tell you one. So I remember I had this intern at work, and it was a year assignment, and he had to go back to he was from another country, and he had to go back and my boss took him to lunch. And I remember telling my mother this story because my mother was, I don't know, she was saying something about, she was doing this passive aggressive thing about, oh, well, you don't have a family, blah, blah, blah. And, which is fine. And he told this intern, told my boss, he said that I had in the year that he had worked for me, I'd had an impact on him like nobody else had ever had. He said, no other man in my life has ever had the influence on me that Douglas has had. And, when Eileen told me that, I welled up in tears and thought, oh my God, really? What did I do? And I tried to tell that to my mother to make her feel, going back to what we talked about earlier, to make her not feel so sad that I never had children. And so after that conversation, or after Eileen, my boss, told me that, I think I really became more aware of the power that we all have to influence people and to have a positive impact on people. I don't think I ever realized how potent it was until someone actually told me.
Sometimes it only takes one person telling you something like that.
Right.
And that having that impact and leaving that impact is always something that I think everybody wants in their life. And you're right. We don't have to have a kid. I mean, sometimes it could just be having a conversation with somebody who's having a bad day, and just getting to know their story.
Right.
So,
and for the record, my mother didn't buy it. She still wanted grandchildren, but
they kind of always do sometimes. So we'll go ahead and go into the pen. So the perfect segue, right? Impact, legacy, your mark on the world. And there's two questions that I like to just kind of go down this rabbit hole with. The first is 2,000 years from now, they're doing an archaeological dig on where you live. They're going to find your apartment, your house, whatever. In that, what do you want them to find? It can only be one item.
Good God.
That speaks to who you are.
I don't know that I wanted to find anything, because I don't think I'm that important. I don't think any of us are that important. I think that we're all the same. We're all different. I don't know, in 2,000 years, in 200 years, I don't know. I don't know that there's anything. I don't feel the need to leave a legacy. I don't feel the need to have a footprint in 200 years, in 2,000 years, I don't feel the need. And they're just things anyway. So I have things that belong to other people that I think are interesting. I have my father's Purple Heart and Air Medal and Distinguished Flying Cross from World War II. I think those are interesting. I have a grandfather clock my grandfather made. I mean, I have a grandfather clock made by my grandfather, which is, it's shit construction, but it's really wonderful and sweet. but I don't know that I have anything that I think makes any sense to save, and I'm more than okay with that.
And so nothing to be found. Understand. Now the other part of this question, which is still kind of related, right? Which is the essence of your impact on someone or on society or on the community. What do you want that to be and why?
I don't know. As we talked about earlier in the beginning of this podcast, death is a real, it's basically standing right next to me right now. It's still very raw. When losing Chris has also made me think about, well, who else is next, right? Who in my family, because my family is the people like Chris that I've surrounded myself with. Who's next? And am I next? And I would actually rather it be me than anybody else. But who's next? And so thinking about mortality is very, very present in my psyche as we're speaking today. So, Glenn Campbell wrote this amazing song for the documentary about him and his Alzheimer's that says, "I won't miss you when I'm gone." The whole point being that I'm gone. I'm gone. I won't miss you because I'm gone. And you should be okay with that. And I don't really want to I don't think it's as important to think about what people will remember me for when I'm gone. I think it's more important for people to remember about me when I'm here and to react to what I do and say when I'm here. And so I don't really feel the need to, I would like for people to remember me when I'm gone. I would like for them to remember me fondly, but that's not going to happen unless I focus on now.
So now this is what I find really, really interesting, and forgive me if I put words in your mouth, and I'm not trying to necessarily do that. I'm trying to interpret it in the way I think that makes sense for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of those things is it's not necessarily important to leave these legacies, right? Because both these questions are related to legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you kind of using some of your language, you say it's like pay attention to who I am and what I'm doing here and now. Don't necessarily worry about all the things that I'm potentially might do and leave behind. Let's focus on this. Let's focus on helping each other. And it's kind of a theme in building the community and reaching people here and now. Is that?
That's, that's absolutely right. And I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you, and I just made this connection based on this conversation. I just connected these dots. So, I've referenced having my dad's World War II medals. And when he died, I had to go over to his office. It's irrelevant. Had to go over to his office and go into the safe. And there was an manila envelope that said to D.W. Spencer to be opened upon the death of W.L. Spencer. Christ, there we go. Okay, there we go. Back in focus. So there was a manila envelope that said to be opened by D.W. Spencer, that's me, upon the death of W.L. Spencer. Now, parenthetically, his father was C.W., his father's father was J.W., and then W.J., and even my mother's father went by A.R. So initials were big. So anyway, I think it's hilarious that he thought I would someday become a D.W. That's never going to happen. Anyway, so there in this manila envelope is this letter from my father, and it said, it was an apology. I'm sorry I don't have a fortune to leave you. It's one of my biggest regrets. Here's what I do have to leave you, though. And it was the medals. And I thought, oh, good God, what is the... So he wasted his whole life. Of course, this is not true. It's exaggeration. He didn't waste his life. His whole life was thinking about what he could leave me tangibly and physically when I just needed him there when he was alive. And so it was just such a heartbreak to read that letter and to feel like he was a failure and that he apologized for leaving me these medals. And that was just heart-wrenching. And, I just don't want to be that. I don't want to worry about what I don't leave somebody. I want to worry about what I do now.
That makes a lot of sense now, kind of like listening through the conversation. Well, that's one question I'll have to ask later too, because normally in the summary I ask if you learned something during the conversation. So we're good there. No, I really, I think it's awesome. It's not awesome.
That's fine.
It's a nice reality check that sometimes it's not like, it's like, don't focus on the legacy as much, focus on the relationship, focus on the person, focus on building that connection, that meaningful connection with that person. And then everything else will be a little different. Pay attention to who I am and see who I am. So,
and you can only do that though if you're proud, and if you are proud of who you are and how you act and what you do. And so my father had a made for Lifetime television deathbed scene. It was ridiculous, and I say that not sincerely, but I mean I just say that to set the stage. You couldn't write this stuff. And it was, he was very weak towards the end. He was having trouble breathing. He was in the hospital. It was my mother was on one side of the bed, and my sister and I were on this side of the bed. And he was just making the sound over and over again, over and over again. And we couldn't figure out what he was trying to say. And so we tried to get some paper, and he couldn't hold the pencil, and he just kept going. It was just like, it was obsession with him. Over and over again. And I looked at my sister and I said, he's trying to say, I love you. And Denise looked at him and she said, is that it, Dad? Are you trying to say, I love you? And tears just well up in this man's face. First time I'd ever seen them. And he starts shaking his head, and he starts shaking his head. And it took this man to his deathbed to be able to tell his children that he loved them. We had never heard that before, because he didn't think he should, and he didn't think it was. And so it was such a relief to him to finally be able to say that it's just, that just reinforces, pay attention to the fucking moment, people. Don't wait. And that's actually, that was actually, I watched that scene, and then I came out of the closet 6 months later, because I thought, I'm not fighting this anymore. It's stupid to fight this. This is who I am. And you know what? Bam. And my life could not be any better, could not have turned out better. So stop, just stop worrying about stuff like that, and just live in the moment and do what you need to do.
so
if you want to tell someone you love them, tell them.
Agreed. And tell them if you make an impact in their life. Agreed. So that is the pin, and that was a doozy too, because I had to think about it a little differently, and that's good. Thank you for that. I don't walk away from these conversations without some major thinking done. So thank you, Douglas. All right, so now we're going to the crown. A little change of pace, and kind of start winding down a little bit. All right, so what's the crown? The crown is the binding. It's fine. It's, it encompasses everything. It, in my mind, it represents self-discipline. It represents not only self-discipline, but leading others, right? And, the burden of leadership in that regard. And we kind of touched on this earlier, is the meditation, and you alluded to some disciplining of yourself in order to maintain that balance. What is there something that really helped you, like, bring you joy when you thought that you were creating a habit that worked?
I don't know. Habit that worked. I don't, I think I'm struggling because I don't really think about what I do in terms of it's a habit or not, or what, making people laugh. I think making people laugh gives me joy. And I think there are very few situations where I don't try to lighten the mood, make people feel, again, going back to this whole absurdity of life thing, right? You can't take it too seriously. You have to take it somewhat seriously, obviously, but you can't take it too seriously because, right? It could end tomorrow. And where would you be? Right. So, and that's a belief I had even before, 2 weeks ago. So, um, I don't know. I don't know that I don't know if maybe I'll have to maybe come back to you on that. I don't know that I have a habit that I think of as one that brings me joy.
Okay, that's understandable. And then, as you're leading, being a business leader, what is some of the greatest things that have impacted you leading others?
Um, I would reframe leader beyond just business. So I think it's
Yes.
important to be a community leader.
Yes.
I was I was I had a somewhat of a larger role in the community in a leadership position, which time to end. Everything has its time. So I think that's important too. It's not just about business, but I think that what's important, and we kind of touched on this before, what's kind of important to um, leadership is making the people that you're theoretically leading feel good about what they're doing. More than anything else, feel good about what they're doing and feel like they want to do it and know why they want to do it. And one of the things I love about millennials, it's so much fun to make fun of millennials, and I know you're one, but
Uh,
I mean, it's so much fun to make fun of millennials because no disrespect, you are ridiculous. But yeah, but one of the things I really respect about millennials is the how you guys don't put up with the same kind of bullshit that we put up with. That whole kind of focus on hierarchy and focus on title and just do it because I said to do it. And I really am grateful for the influence that millennials are having on our culture in that. And you look at the Great Resignation, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, listen, we're not going to do this. There's no reason to do this. I don't want to do it. I don't feel that. I don't understand why. There's no bigger picture. It's not for any great value. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I really am grateful for that kind of influence that millennials have had on the culture. I'm still going to make fun of you because you are ridiculous in many, many ways. But I'm really grateful about how that impact you've had on our culture. And I think that is a massive shift in humanity that we can attribute to millennials. And I hope that gives me permission to now make fun of millennials because I give you credit where it's due.
maybe because I got to edit some of this stuff too. So, what was a significant event while leading the community that you think fondly on?
Well, so I will say that any leadership I've done in the community is on the shoulders of men who are no longer with us. I have the life I have because of the men and women who died of AIDS, because they died by being a part of society that no one wanted to talk about, no one respected, no one celebrated. They died because nobody cared. But slowly, when they died, people started to realize, hey, that was my uncle. Wait, that was my brother. And I cared about him. And so I stand on their shoulders. I have the life I have because of them. And I try to be as out as possible for that same reason. My mother my mother once said to me, I understand that this is who you are. I just don't understand why we need to talk about it. which is a typical WASP response from a woman that was born in 1921. Totally get it. And I said, well, the reason we need to talk about it is because suicide, because being questioning your sexuality is one of the leading causes of suicide in our culture. And I listed off a bunch of kids in our family at the time. And I said, if by me making you uncomfortable talking about the fact that I'm gay keeps them from taking their own lives, then yeah, that's why we need to talk about it. And so I've always, in my corporate life, I know that our promotions were passed. I was passed over for promotions because I was openly gay, and I'm okay with that because I know there are colleagues who have now adult gay, lesbian, transgender children that they think, okay, well, it's not the end of the world. I kind of like that Doug Spencer guy. He was all right, and I guess it's okay. And so, yeah, so I think being your, and this is such a cliche to say, but being your authentic self is massively important. And you can't be a good leader. You absolutely positively cannot be a good leader unless you are authentically yourself. Because if you aren't, it's just going to fall to pieces. I mean, look at all of the people who are celebrated and then have falls from graces. And that's because they're not being their authentic selves from day to day. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of soapboxes tonight. So I'll get off of this.
Fine. That's fine. Is there a particular time where you were in you were authentic, you being authentic helped create like another impact on somebody or the community?
I would imagine, but I don't do it to know about it. I would imagine.
There we go.
I don't do it for someone to say, "Oh, yay, thank you." No. It's just, I'm just being the best Doug I can be, and
I don't know
that. That's all I can do. And if somebody despises me for it, okay. If someone feels better about themselves because of it, that's great. It doesn't matter. I think we all just have to. I love the memes that say something along the lines of you're the only one you are, so be you. Unless you can be Superman, then be Superman, but otherwise be you, or something like that. The whole point is, come on, people, just be yourselves. Just be yourselves.
Well, Doug, I can call you Doug, can I?
Yeah, you can. Yes. I'll tell you why. So funny story. So I was Doug, always been Doug, but I started working when I had a global position. I started working with people for whom English was not their primary language. And Doug is a challenge. Doug is a challenge. I was called Doe. I was called Dog. And everyone gets Douglas. Everyone gets that. But so I start with Douglas. If it goes to Doug, that's fine. But I don't want to start with Doe because that's just not sexy.
Well, it's been a privilege to have you on the Meaningforge.
Well, it's been a privilege to be here.
I have personally learned a lot, not only about you and your story, but more about who you are. And all good things, just like Olaf says, in Frozen. And one of the things that, like, if I were to kind of summarize this story, unapologetically Douglas. Being who you are, being authentic, everything about this and about your story that I've connected with has been all about being unapologetically Douglas.
That's nice to hear. I don't always feel that way. But that's nice to hear.
Well, that's what I got. And you're from everything from where you're from to where you are today, to what you care about and to what you do, how you make, how you embody, and how you share meaning in your life is all about that. And there's nothing more authentic than doing those things, right? Sometimes you're not gonna please everybody. Sometimes I don't know if you can piss off everybody. That might be something you could do.
I have pissed off plenty of people, believe me.
But the good news is being yourself is infinitely more important.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that it's just a big theme and a big idea for Douglas Spencer. And so as we kind of wind down here in the Meaningforge, we're both bourbon fans.
Yes.
One, what are you drinking tonight?
It's good.
And then what's your bourbon tidbit?
So I'm drinking Maker's Mark, which is it's good. It's not like designer or uber fancy. I have been known to drink Kirkland bourbon because why not? But there's this great story in my family about this night that my father and his best friend decided to take out their fathers-in-law for a guy's night out. So this would be my father taking out my grandfather, my mother's father. And my father worshipped his in-laws, which was so refreshing because, how often does that happen? So my dad's friend, Dick, and took out my grandfather, AR, and Dick's father-in-law, Ralph. So they start off at my grandfather's house. And Grandpa Brenneman says, all right, boys, what are we drinking? And Ralph says, well, I'll have a gin and tonic. And Dick says, I'll have a beer. And Dad says, well, I'll have a vodka stinger. And so Grandpa comes out from the kitchen with 4 glasses and a bottle of bourbon. And he says, there's your vodka stinger. There's your gin and tonic. And here's my bourbon. So bourbon is the drink to drink when you want to drink anything. It's just you just drink it.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
On so many different levels. And bourbon to me it's an American drink.
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I went to Scotland a few years ago, and do you know that the barrels that they make bourbon in are deconstructed and shipped to Scotland to make Scotch?
Mm-hmm. We use a lot of bourbon barrels to do it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You can cut that out because everybody knows that apparently.
Oh, no, it's perfectly fine. I love talking about bourbon. There's a few clips of me and other channels doing a bourbon sniff test where it's pretty bad. I get a little into it.
Okay.
So while we die down, what are the top 3 books that you'd recommend for somebody to help develop themselves or just to get them through in a pinch?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a different. So the way you sent me questions in advance, and those, I don't think that's the way it was written.
Top 3 books. Any number of reasons why.
Yeah, top 3 books, not to necessarily recommend. So, top 3 books are 10% Happier, like I mentioned. Drive by Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink is amazing. He's a futurist, I guess, a PhD in behavioral, in organizational behavior. He's really great. Drive is a fascinating book. One of the things in it is that we are teaching our children completely inappropriately now. We are still teaching our children as if we live in the industrial age, which, newsflash, done, over. And then another book that was really helpful, and I don't use... I feel like I spent the last half an hour talking about being gay, but so when I was coming out, one of the novels that really touched me was Flesh and Blood by Michael Cunningham, and it really I really identified with his character and his journey in becoming who he was. And so, from a fiction point of view, that's one of my favorite books.
All great books. Haven't read them, but they all sound great. And they're coming from you. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And so on my show, my guest had the last word because it's the final words. It's your words of wisdom to whoever's watching. And as I said earlier, it's been a privilege to have you on. Thank you so much.
Gosh, words of wisdom. That's, no pressure there. I guess my words of wisdom is try not to take yourself too seriously, take yourself seriously enough, and focus on the moment, because the past is done. There's nothing you could do about the past. You can do nothing about the past, and you can't do anything about the future because it hasn't happened yet. So just focus now. Focus on the moment. That's all I got.